Marion.
And we are live.
Yay!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Mighty Blaze. I am Mary O'Malley, co host of Blaze Boudoir. We are here the fourth Wednesday of every month at 8 p.m. Central. And today we are so excited to be featuring author Kat Sebastian. As we get started, a few words about the Blaze. If you're a regular, welcome back. If you're new to the Blaze, please know that we are a team of creative professional volunteers connecting writers and readers on our digital platforms. If you like what you see here, please give us a like and a follow on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere you find us. And please consider signing up for our newsletter at amightyblaze.com so you'll be kept in the know about all of our upcoming events. A little about me. I am a writer and a virtual bookseller for Skylark Bookshop in Columbia, Missouri, reading and blurbing books across most genres. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Blurb Your Enthusiasm. Kate LeBeau, who is my daughter, splits her time between reading romance, writing about romance, making memes about romance, and hanging out with her husband and son. She runs the blog Romantically Inclined Reviews and the Instagram Romantically_inclined. She reads all genres and heat levels from proper romance to erotica and absolutely everything in between. Tonight, what better way to celebrate Pride Month than to welcome queer historical romance author Kat Sebastian. Kat Sebastian has written 16 queer historical romances. Kat's books have received starred reviews from Kirkus, Publisher Weekly, Library Journal, and Booklist. Before writing, Kat was a lawyer and a teacher and did a variety of other jobs she liked much less than she enjoys writing happy endings for queer people. She was born in New Jersey and lived in New York and Arizona before settling down in a swampy part of the South. When she isn't writing, she's probably reading, having one sided conversations with her dog, or doing the crossword puzzle. So, Kat and Kate are going to spend a little time talking about Kat's latest books and all things romance. And then I will be back after a little bit to ask your questions. So, as you listen along, if you have a question, just pop it into the chat and we will get to it in just a few minutes. So, Kate and Kat, I will let you guys take it away.
Okay, well, I learned a lot from that bio. Like, I did not know that you were a lawyer, even though I just read your bio like 4 minutes ago. It doesn't mention. Oh, don't say it. Dang it. So I didn't read that part. Okay, sorry. We are going to be talking primarily about Kat's most recent release, The Perfect Crimes of Marion Hayes, which is part of the series following the queer principles of Kit Webb. I have lots of Kat's books ready. And so, Kat, I don't know if you want to start off just by giving us a brief overview of the book, your little spiel about it, so people know what we're talking about.
Sure. So basically, there's a highwayman, okay, who for reasons isn't doing highwaymaning anymore, and instead he decides that on principle he is going to blackmail rich people. And so he starts sending blackmail letters to this lady who, it turns out, she is not legally married to her husband because her husband was previously married to our blackmailer's dad. Okay. So our blackmailer's mom. Okay. And so he blackmails her and she writes back a mean letter. And he is super into mean women. And so he's really into that. And they start basically being pen pals. And he is the world's worst blackmailer and basically falls in love with her instantly. And then she kills her husband and needs to run out of town. And so she turns to the only person she knows who is cool with crime, her blackmailer. And then they basically go have a road trip. And
so many tropes already.
Yeah.
We have letter writing trope, which I know people are super into. We have not super, it's not entirely femdom, but hints of that.
Yeah.
And then we have like the road trip, which I know people are super into. And then he also loves animals a lot.
Yes,
He's
a sweetheart. He's a sweetheart, and she's awful. You know what I mean? Like, she's awful in a way that, like, that I think we all want to be awful.
I literally wrote that, like, I think that I'm too much like her.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I think that, like,
I feel like I'm like, she's kind of a bitch, and then I was like, oh no, I'm a bitch.
No, she's a bitch. Like, and it's so many people have had that reaction where like she's a bitch. I identify with her. I kind of feel like I'm a bitch, and I'm like, yeah, like that's kind of the point. Is that when we stop taking shit from people, we're automatically a bitch, and like there's like probably that probably means that being a bitch isn't that bad, you know.
And I love, like, my favorite part, and I don't think this is a spoiler, but is that she doesn't become not a bitch. She isn't magically unbitched by like a man's presence in her life. In fact, she finds a man who gets turned on by her bitch. So it's like the dream, like, right? Like a dream come true.
Yeah. Like, she professionalizes her bitchiness. Like, that's her happy ending, is like to be even bitchier and make it her career. Okay.
I love that. I seriously, like, I didn't know anything. I don't even think I really read. I like read a little of the blurb before starting, but I was like, oh, I'm reading this no matter what. Why don't I just dive on in? And I think this isn't my favorite book of yours ever, because that goes to Lawrence Brown Affair. I read this like 1,000 times a year. Like, I think I read it once a month. So if anyone is looking for, this is just the best. I mean, the best book ever. But this was a pretty close second, because it just hit, like I said, it hit so many tropes, and it was just like, he was so sweet. And I think that's what people are wanting right now. And I was wondering if you've been seeing that trend in romance lately, that the alpha male is kind of going by the wayside, and women kind of want these men who are like emotionally available and talk about their feelings. And I think Ice Planet Barbarians kind of kicked this off in a way. I always turn things back around to Ice Planet Barbarians. But like, people read that and they were like, whoa, we can have books where the man worships the woman and there's no like angst in terms of like his devotion to her. He's not pushing her away, nothing. And you get that in The Perfect Crimes of Marion Hayes. So have you seen that trend in romance?
First of all, like, that's the first time I've ever been compared to like Ruby Dixon, and I'm really excited about it. Like, this is a big moment for me. Okay.
The hoops I had to jump through in order to
But like, I feel like there are a lot of people who decided at once that if they are going to write women and men being paired, that he is going to be all in from page one. You know what I mean? Like, and that he's going to be emotionally available, like not necessarily submissive, but maybe not submissive, you know? Okay. So like that dynamic might play out in the bedroom. And just like really into all of her mess, you know? And I think if that's a trend, and I hope it's a trend, you know, I am all for it.
Yeah. We're kind of done with like the fixing the man. And now we want nobody to be fixed.
No one's fixed.
We want everyone to be accepted for who they are. We don't want to be dealing with like creating a man, the man of our dreams out of a pre-existing man.
No.
We're done with that. No. We don't want that.
No. But like his journey, like his character arc cannot be like becoming an acceptable person to date.
We're done with that. That's over. Which that kind of brings me to a lot of your characters have health and or like mental health issues or mental disorders or, you know, all sorts of things. And I love that no one's trying, well, I mean, in the case of the malaria, I guess they would like to heal him if they could. But no, people are accepted the way they are in your books. No one's like, for instance, in the Lawrence Brown Affair, Lawrence has, at the very least, a sensory processing disorder. I don't think, I would say autism wasn't a thing back then. But I guess today he would probably be classified as having autism. And Georgie, and this is the book I know all the details on, he just accepts him that way, and he's convincing him that he's not crazy and he's not going to go mad and he doesn't need to isolate himself from people and he's not going to become a horrible person because he has the sensory processing disorder. And like I just love that I just love that theme in all of your books, that like you've had one of your heroes has a seizure disorder. I believe PTSD is in some, you touch on grief. And the loss of a partner, that is, especially it's a hero who loses his undefined partner in a way, and he doesn't know how to grieve that, especially in a time when you can't be with a man publicly. And so I was just wondering, how much like research do you have to do? I mean, it's hard enough to introduce those in a contemporary romance, but now you're introducing those concepts in a historical romance, and you kind of have to keep it within the time period. Do you find that that's like difficult? I know research is like your thing, but is that difficult?
Like with my first few books, I basically, I mean, except for like, okay, like I don't have PTSD from like fighting Napoleon. Okay. So like I can't really speak to that. But with my first few books, I really did just base it on my own personal experience with brain stuff and with like chronic illness, you know, and so I went based on symptoms and how you might feel about symptoms. Okay. Without really necessarily like with it, since there isn't a diagnosis in 1815 or whenever the book is taking place, you don't have to deal with that. Okay. Like you don't have to have a name for it. All you have to do is feel a certain way about it and know that you are like lovable and acceptable and that you belong in the state that you're currently in, right? And maybe you can develop a skill set to deal with the stuff that's going on with you, you know, like a healthy way of dealing with it. So yeah, that's kind of my approach, is to deal with how it feels to feel a certain way from the character's point of view, rather than getting into like the nitty gritty of like what the condition is.
I've noticed at the back, I don't know if it's at the back of your physical books, but at the back of a lot of your ebooks, you have like an author's note where you'll kind of like take apart your like explain your research, explain where you were coming from. And I was wondering like if you started putting those author notes in for a reason, to like get ahead of anybody who might like, I believe, I don't think I made this up, but I believe in regard to A Gentleman Never Keeps Score, which features a Black hero who owns a bar, that you may have gotten some people who were kind of claiming that couldn't have been possible in the time for a Black man to own a business.
Right. There are always people. Like there are always people, and like yes, especially with a Black character, there are a lot of people who like, no matter what proof you show them, they're not going to believe that it was possible for anybody who wasn't a white man to have any kind of like success or a place in the world, right? So for like my first couple of books, I did include several author's notes, and I don't do it anymore for that reason, because it's like there's for the people who aren't on board aren't going to be on board. Like, you know, like it doesn't matter how many receipts I show them. Okay. So now I just totally ignore any criticism about historical accuracy, you know, although like I got like a funny email about like how wrong I was about the Navy once. And it was like, I was totally expecting to be for it to be homophobic. And no, it was just that it turns out I really was wrong about the Navy. Like I really didn't expect like to have a hardcore naval historian fan. Okay. But I guess
like you know, I have like a research paper of all the ways that you like messed up the terminology. Was that in terms of was that like in terms of It Takes Two to Tumble?
No, it was in that series. It was Two Rogues Make a Right. And
I only own the ebook of that. That's a really good one too, though. I love that one. Which is funny because
I don't even know what I got wrong.
The first time I read it, I was like, I will not like. Is his name, was it Will?
Martin is the one who you definitely thought you weren't gonna like.
I was like, I will not like Martin, and I went into the book thinking that, and I came out of the book and I was like, I do not like Martin. And then I reread it again, and I was like, okay, no, I love this book. Like, my prejudice against Martin was like so strong that I was like not willing to forgive him the first time through. But I've loved every single one of them. So it came around. The second time I read it, it was so unbelievably sweet in a way that some of the other ones, like, they just didn't get that. I think it's the friends to lovers thing. It's like it just hit so deep inside that I was like emotionally traumatized in a good way, if that's possible. It's possible. I said it's possible. So
it's possible.
And so another thing you cover a lot in your books is class difference. So whenever anyone asks for like a historical romance with like a big class difference, I always recommend your books. And I was wondering if that's just something that I feel like all of your books involve pretty. I mean, do any of them include two high-born people?
No.
Maybe the ruin of a rake doesn't either, because he.
Yeah, like
kind of
one of them is like comfortable middle class, and the other one is semi-impoverished aristocracy. You know what I mean? So like it's still a class difference, right?
Yeah, that's why I was like, I think it's a. This used to be my favorite one, but it has been usurped. Ruin of a rake. I just absolutely like Lord Courtney was just like bad boy central. Let's go to court. But yeah, so is that just something you really like to toy with, the like class difference? I mean, obviously that creates a lot of conflict that's easy to work around.
Yeah, I like it because I like for the resolution to be that the rich person isn't rich anymore. Like that we treat having inherited wealth as like an obstacle for the rich person to overcome. And I like that. Okay. Like he's like, that's because from the, like my first book came out in 2016. So like all of my books have been written in like, like dark political times. Right. So like, I will happily read about dukes. You know what I mean? Like doing duke things and like being rich and like total like material escapism. I'm fine reading it, but I can't sit down for 6 months at my computer and write about it. Okay. Like I can't sustain disbelief in that system for long enough to write a book. Okay. So I like when the poor person or the poorer person is like, I don't like rich people. I don't want to be fancy. You disgust me, like with your wealth. And the rich person is like, actually, yeah, you have a point, and that, so they come together, like they meet on an, at the end, like their happy ending is on a equal level, but it's not the rich person's level, right? Like they're settling into some kind of like middle class or lower middle class obscurity. And that's, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's definitely a difference from, because I feel like for a long time it was, the Duke's marrying his maid. Yeah. The Duke's marrying his nanny or governess or whatever. The Duke's marrying the Earl. He's slightly more poor. Is marrying the fallen from grace wallflower or whatever. And now you've got.
I love that. Like I eat that up, right?
Yeah,
that's like awesome. Like tell me more.
I want to dream of marrying rich. Like that's great. But then if it's something more. I don't know. It's very beautiful to have that trope kind of flipped and see these people giving up, especially in a time when like wealth meant literally everything. Like that was your stat. Like it was just, if you were poor, you obviously had very fulfilling lives, but they didn't think you did. The rich people were kind of like, nah. So I do love that. Yeah, like every single one of your books has that kind of like conflict in it. And so another question I was wondering, because you're kind of doing some great things here with some really awesome pairings in terms of like, I think I mentioned there's both the hero and heroine in this book are bisexual. You have pairings of bisexual men with gay men, and you have non-binary individuals with men. And I was wondering if there's any like pairings that you're like looking forward to writing, or anything that you I don't know. I feel like the majority of your books are at least gay romance. But I know like you have, I don't own it, I have the ebook, but you have one lesbian romance, although she might have been, one of them might have been bisexual.
It's just one. So far, just one. Another one coming out either the end of this year or early next year.
Okay, so you have that coming up.
Yeah, no, and I'm
excited about that. Or anything you can tell us about it?
Oh yeah, it's in the I have one series that takes place after World War II in England, and it's like a mystery series. It's one of my self-published series. And
I don't think
I wrote a pair of elderly lesbians in the first book who sort of like stole the show, and everybody has been like asking when they're going to get their book. And so I've been whenever I take a break from writing some other book, or when I'm in between like revisions coming back, I add to their prequel story, you know? And so I think it'll be out at the end of this year or early 2023. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be really exciting.
Yeah.
Because I feel like authors don't often go back. Like they'll introduce these like really fun pairings, and then but they don't. They're like, oh, their story is kind of is just supplementing the main story. So I like that you're going back and giving your readers like what they want.
It's one of the things that with self-publishing, it's easier to do, right?
Mhm.
Like, because I'm pretty bad at planning series. Like I like historically the third, like when I pitch a 3-book series, the third book is like is not the book that I write. Okay. Like it's totally, I wind up going really off script, and that's not necessarily good, you know, but with
Sorry, that's how I read books.
Yeah.
So like The Ruin of a Rake was my first like read. I had an arc of it, and I'm pretty sure this is not. I was kind of like confused. I felt like, what is this? It's not the first book in your series,
Nope,
right?
It's the third, yeah.
Yeah. So that was very confusing for me. Then I read the Lawrence Brown affair, and I was like, oh, it's all making sense.
Yep. That's that's how I read too. Like I don't care a lot about chronology, but it turns out that like when you're trying to write a universe, like you probably should know what happened.
I imagine when you're writing the third book, then you kind of like you back yourself into a corner then, and you have to like figure out how to make something in the first book work so it makes sense.
Yep.
That would be very confusing. I was wondering, how do you keep track of I feel like I've said this before, but I'm very much in awe of historical writers or historical romance writers, not like nonfiction or whatever, but I'm in awe of them too, but for different reasons. That like contemporary is difficult enough. You know, you've got to stay within the confines of like contemporary world and our rules. Fantasy, you kind of make up your own stuff, but historical, you not only have to stay within very strict rules, or you have Navy people coming after you, but you have to you have to learn all that stuff to begin with. Like that's a lot of information. And so how do you keep everything, not only the real facts, but then the facts that you've written? Like what's your organization process like?
Like for my first series, there was no organization process. Okay. Like, cause I was totally convinced that like, even though I had a book deal, I was convinced that like somebody at Avon HarperCollins was going to realize that they didn't want to publish my books. You know, like, I had no reason to believe that. Everybody was super nice. Like I had no reason to believe that, other than just like it seemed not likely, you know, that this was actually happening. So I didn't have a document with anything on it. I just sort of like crossed my fingers and hoped for the best. And that turns out to be the series with the fewest inconsistencies between.
What?
Yeah, the other series absolutely do have inconsistencies between the books, even though I do keep a document, even though the copy editors also like kind of keep a document with everybody's names and ages.
No one keeps track of shit better than a reader.
Yes.
Like, you have that one reader who's like, this side character who has 2 lines, his eyes were blue in the last book and they're brown in this book. What's up?
Yeah. I get like really, really polite questions every now and then. So like how come X and Y happened in this book, but then Z happens in that book? And I'm like, well, because I fucked up. You know, like
I forgot.
Like, sorry. You know?
You go back and read your like the first book in a series when you're writing, or like, you know,
No.
you go back and read. No, so that's really.
I should. Obviously, I should. Like having this conversation makes it pretty clear that I should. But like, it's so painful, you know, because it's like you can't enjoy the stuff that you wrote, right? Like that's not happening. And like you can't fix it either. So you're in this limbo. Like, no, thank you. Like I know people do it and God bless them, but like I need to just sort of like let go and let God. You know, like that's what we're gonna do with book.
I can't even look at my memes after I posted them in case that there's some sort of spelling error. I'm like, I cannot. Like, I'm done. It's out there in the universe. Meh. Whatever.
That's everything that I've ever put on the internet has a typo in it. And I know that this stresses a lot of people out, but I feel like that's just now my personal brand. Okay.
I like that. Just turn everything people don't like about you
Mhm.
into like, that's my personal brand. That's just how, like, I write typos. That's fine.
It'll prepare you. It'll prepare you for like when I don't have the character have the same middle name from book 1 to book 2. Okay.
My mom's gonna come back in a sec, but I'm curious what couple that you've written, like, I don't know, like, is the most special in your heart. Is that too hard of a question? Like, I feel like I'm not asking you to pick a favorite necessarily. It could be a couple like you don't even like that much, but like they touched you while you were writing it. You were just like, this is.
Oh, it's Lawrence Brown, and it's like because he's my first character with like serious brain stuff, right? And so that was a real experience for me, writing a character with brain stuff that was similar to my own, right? And like sort of like you write a whole book basically telling this character repeatedly that everything is going to be okay, right? Like, and so you wind up sort of believing it at the end, and so Lawrence Brown is very special to me.
For those wondering, so this is just my favorite one because you have Lawrence is a gentle giant and he's a virgin mostly, and he is just thinks that he needs to be alone forever. He thinks that his like autism sensory processing disorder makes him completely unlovable and might actually make him, I guess his brother was like a psychopath, so he's worried about, and his father, he's worried about becoming them. And then you have Georgie, a little thief who steals into his household to steal all of his he's making the telegraph machine, I believe. And Georgie's there to steal it, and Georgie instead is just like, I'm gonna fall in love with you and make you love yourself. And that's just like, that's the vibe. That's the vibe I'm here for these days. So I'm gonna have to reread this later today. Oh no, she's back. She's here to ruin our good time. Well, we cannot hear you, Ma. You're still muted.
You'd like it if it stayed that way.
Honestly, a little bit.
If Kate was talking about the Lawrence Brown affair, I remember as she was reading it, her talking about it constantly because she loved it so much. As you started talking about it, I was like, I remember when you were reading this, and
they all have a special place in my heart.
They do, and on your bookshelves.
Yeah, I had to find them all. My bookshelves are color coded, so it was I had to remember what all their spines were. It wasn't hard.
So we've got a few questions here, and the comments have been great as we've been going along. I was laughing along as the two of you were talking. I love it. I just love everything you talked about, Kat. Just made your book so real and authentic and true, which I think is lovely. So Margaret asked, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love, loathe, concocting and updating all the back matter for ebooks when you publish the new books?
So with my Avon books, thank God somebody else does it. Okay. For my self-published books, I was dreading it so much that I just didn't do it. Okay. Like I just this is so bad. This is like, I should make a list of the things that I do that are like cautionary tales.
I feel like you're making other aspiring authors feel better though about like their own chaotic processes. So
it's like, I was looking at it, I was like, I could do this. I was like, I could, like, there is a version of me in some universe somewhere like that could sit down and update the back matter and not have like a crisis. But it's not me, so I'm just gonna publish the book. However, somebody told me a really easy way to do it. So for my next book, I remember who told me, but not what they said. So I'm going to ask them, or I'm going to hire someone, possibly one of my teenage children, to just do it.
What a job!
Yeah,
a good first job for the resume.
Yep.
Excellent. You need an intern. You need somebody in the romance world, a reader, to be your intern. Anybody, just feel free to, Margaret also asked how excited, trepidatious you are about the new Persuasion adaptation coming out July 15th.
So I haven't seen the trailer yet, okay? Just because I know that I will want to watch it, okay? So I'm going to wait until I'm able to, like, until it's like streaming on something that I have access to, and then I will think about it, because I know that I'm going to be all in. I would watch a bad Persuasion adaptation. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't necessarily for any Austen adaptation, but for Persuasion, like it could be pretty horrible and I would still watch it. So I'm pretty glad.
Love it, love it. The Bushcraftsman wants to know if you've ever written yourself into one of your stories.
No. I mean, I hate to put it this way, I've put stuff that's wrong with me like into stories, like I've put illness and brain stuff into stories, but I've never, no. I am I wouldn't even know how to begin to do it, right? Like I'd have to really think about who am I as a character, and that seems like a really unfun project.
Have you ever put anybody into your books? No. Is anybody? If you had to, I'm just curious now. If you had to cast, are you any good at that? Like one of these
No, I'm
characters?
terrible at it. I'm completely face blind.
The
I have no
romance
idea what my characters look like or anything.
I never know, but I feel like if you ask the romance world, they just cast Henry Cavill in everything.
Yes,
so that's what I pictured for Rob.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's always Henry Cavill. And I always the Joel, who does the audiobooks, okay. Joel Leslie.
I'm pretty sure Joel Leslie does all the queer romance.
I don't know how. I don't know. He must talk all day.
He does, I think, all of Lily Morton's contemporaries. He does all of hers, and I've heard he is amazing.
He's really good. He does mine that are that take place in America too, which is that's range. Yeah. But he always asks for casting ideas because that helps him figure out, okay. And for every single book, I'm like, this is the Ben Whishaw character. I'm not even pretending. That's just, I have one character that's Ben Whishaw and one character who I ask my beta reader. I'm like, so who is this one? And then she tells me who, and then I just put that name in and send it to Joel. And I never know who they are.
Some readers are so good at that. The people who make those little graphics where they're always casting different people. I'm like, I didn't picture anybody. I have that issue where you can't see a face. Yeah. So when I'm reading, I literally am picturing nobody. It's a blurry face, basically. So I'm always like, whoa, that's who you pictured? And I'm like, okay, I can see it.
That works. That works. Margaret would also like to know, what is the best and worst part of being a hybrid author?
Oh, I don't even have a bad part. I actually it's worked out really well for me. I love traditional publishing in that it gives me deadlines and it gives, you know what I mean? I like other aspects too. I enjoy having other people be in charge of marketing and knowing that the product that gets released is going to be a professional product. Okay. There will be end matter. Right. But I also with self-publishing, you can do stories that maybe nobody wants to read, okay, and you can find out. When I did the post-war romance mystery series, I mean no traditional publisher wanted it, that was for sure, and I wasn't sure that any readers would want it either, and it turns out that they did, enough to make it worthwhile for me to keep writing it, right? And so that's fun for me because at least 2/3 of the challenge of writing a book is finding an idea that you actually like enough to sit down and write it for the entire length of time it takes to write a book, and that you're still going to like it enough to want to revise it, And so for 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 3 projects to be a self-published book there's no rule about what I need to write other than that I want to write it, that's great.
Yeah. And I feel in this day and age, especially with how well self-publishing is going for authors and stuff, that there's just a market for pretty much any book.
Mm-hmm.
Any
Yep.
book these days, you will find readers who want it or who didn't know they wanted it and now they do.
Yeah.
So.
And that leads us to Olga's question, which is, in your writing process, do you come up with the plot or the characters first, and how do you tie them together?
Oh, that's a great question. I definitely come up with I sort of wiggle back and forth between those. Like I'll have a premise that I know that is, or like sort of like a loose hook that I know that I'm going to start with. Like it's going to be a road trip. And then I figure out what the character dynamic is going to be. Not necessarily like the backstory or who they are, but is it going to be Grumpy Sunshine? Is it going to be, like someone who's like super bratty and someone who is, I don't know, who do we pair with brats? Like probably another brat if you're me, but so just
chaos.
Yeah, like to figure out like how they interact, right? And then I start writing, and again, I'm very ignorant about what the story is going to be at this point, and I just sort of like go back and forth between I have them interact, and I see if that's what I really want the story to look like, and I'm usually wrong, and then I go back and do it again, and then I am on the right track. This is a terrible process, but it's worked well enough. It's worked well enough for me to get a couple books out of it. So
yeah. And the Bushcraftsman wonders, how do you decide which tropes to include? Do you include just what you like, or do you try to gauge what your audience might want?
I just write what I like. The tropes. Yeah, just write it across the board. It's what I like. Yeah.
What is your favorite trope?
I love friends to lovers so much. As a writer, I love writing friends. I like writing it. I like reading it. Love it. There are a lot of tropes that I like to read, but that I wouldn't want to write, or I don't think that I could do justice to, like real enemies to lovers, like where they're actually trying to kill one another. I will read that. I will read that all day long, but I don't think I could do it plausibly. They would just wind up chatting by the third chapter. This is, you know what I mean?
You literally wrote a blackmailer, a blackmailee falling in love with her blackmailer. So yeah, you're not very good at the enemy.
No, I'm not good at that. No, both books in that series I had pitched as much they had much harder edges when I pitched them. Okay, and that was in 2019. And then the pandemic hit, and I wasn't gonna write anything that was bleak. It wasn't gonna happen, and I also around that same time made peace with who I am as a writer. Not made peace with, that sounds really dark, but I'm you know what, I'm good at writing characters who are really into one another from the beginning, right? And who assume the best of one another, and who aren't at daggers drawn throughout the book, right? That's not my strength. Other people do the daggers drawn thing really well. They should do that. Okay. And I will read those books, but I should do the other thing.
That's like a Duke in Disguise is another one of your friends. I was looking to see which are your friends to lovers. And that's the one with, is it Verity?
Yep.
You heard of that one? So I like that one a lot too. She's running a printing store, a printing shop, and printing erotica on the side. And that was one of the ones I think you had an author note in the back, because you were like, this happened. This is a real thing that happened. Do not come at me and tell me that people did not read erotica or print erotica. And I love that there's just a heroine basically being exactly what all of us want to do. It's a historical version of owning a bookshop.
Yep.
It's just printing porn.
Our final question is also from Margaret. Class difference, one of her favorites. She's our historical expert here. Did you take inspiration from Gaskell?
Oh,
yeah.
North and South. I'm trying to I literally can't even think of another Gaskell novel. Only in the sense that that Richard Armitage character lives in my brain. Okay. So that's more taking inspiration from that particular miniseries than it is from Elizabeth Gaskell. I don't think I could write a noble mill owner or anything like that. I don't think that would happen. there would be riots and unions. But but that character does live in my mind. If I were to start fan casting, there would, or whatever casting, like, yeah, there would be early 2000s Richard Armitage in everything, unfortunately.
Awesome.
I want to ask one more question.
Okay.
Do it.
I am curious, just for other people who are fans of yours or who just want to break more into the queer historical sector, who are some authors that you would recommend? And you can recommend yourself. Who are some other authors you would recommend in this genre?
Oh, Olivia Waite, for sure. Like, I mean, that's like Olivia, her most recent book, Hellions Waltz, is like a perfect novel. I like the other two books in that series very, very much, but this one is just a total delight. Like, it is light, it is bright, it is so cheerful. They're doing like crimes the entire book, and it never occurs to anyone in this entire universe that crime might be a bad idea. Okay, like we're just living in a pro-crime world. It's wonderful. I love it. It's like you've like two queer women who are like very accepted by the society they live in, like, and it's in a way that feels very historically real. So yeah, that and Ali Theron's series, which are in 1920s magical New York. And
I know people are always looking for like non-England historical romances. So that's great.
This is like, it's such good world building. I mean, there is magic, and so I know a lot of people are like, but I don't want to read fantasy romance. But no, like, but this is like, the romance really is like the center of the book, right? It's not just an afterthought, and the characters are so finely drawn, and it's really a lovely reading experience. And it's 1920s New York, which you just don't see every day. So those are the two authors I'd start with.
There.
Hooray. Well, Kat, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so
I don't
much.
want it to end, though. I want to get going.
I hope for everyone watching, if you like what you saw here tonight, then please do go everywhere you find us: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, like, follow, subscribe, and do sign up for our newsletter at amightyblaze.com. All of our interviews do live forever on our YouTube channel, so you can always go back there and watch previous author interviews. And our guest next month is Annabelle Monahan with her blockbuster hit book, Nora Goes Off Script, which I just absolutely adored. So I hope you will join us in July. And thanks so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. Hope to see you back here next month. Bye, friends.
Bye.